Hi, welcome to Righteous Recipes, Shabbat edition. I'm Alexia.
And I'm Shayna.
And today we're going to be teaching you how to make challah for Shabbat.
So, for your challah recipe, you're going to want to start by getting all of the important ingredients. And we're going to turn to Alexia for what those are.
So here we have our ingredients. We have 4 cups of bread flour. We have 5 tablespoons of honey. We have 3 teaspoons of yeast. 2 teaspoons of fine salt. You can use coarse salt, but then it kind of gets that gritty feel when it's baked. We don't really like that, so we did not do that. We went with the fine salt. Then we also have eggs here. We've got a couple kinds of varieties of eggs. We have 2 with the whites and the yolks, and then we also have 2 with just the yolks. We went ahead and whisked them ahead of time just to have everything prepared for you today. We also have 1/3 cup of oil. Now you can use vegetable oil or you can use olive oil. If you use olive oil though, make sure it's a light variety. Anything too heavy is gonna have a weird aftertaste once that bread's baked. And then we also have some extra bread flour for when we go ahead and knead the dough.
Perfect. So, just so you're aware, this is the most basic challah recipe there is. If you can master this recipe, you can start to get fancy with your cinnamon challahs or putting your sesame seeds on or your pretzel challahs, whatever. But start here, you get the base and then you can move up. So we're gonna start with our dry ingredients. We're gonna take our flour and add it to our mixing bowl. Perfect. Woo! Perfect. So you're gonna kind of make that nice and even, and then we're gonna take our yeast and put it on the right side of the bowl, and you're gonna take your salt and put it on the left side of the bowl. We're gonna take these dry ingredients and mix them together real softly with your finger. You're not gonna wanna take a whisk to this because we just want it to kind of be like a rough mix. Nothing too heavy, nothing too intense because we don't wanna break up the salt or the yeast at this point. So just mix it in with your fingers.
Nice and even, good job. That looks great.
Hey, do you have any really good like Shabbat memories?
You know, some of my favorites are just sitting around the dinner table with my family. Like we always make really good meals on Friday nights, including the challah. So that's usually my favorite mealtime is just when there's a nice meal and some challah on the table.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. There's something about a good meal on Shabbat that really ties everybody together.
It's so true.
Especially if you're making it together. If you get the family together and you're kind of like baking all day and then you finally get to enjoy it.
It's so true.
Perfect. Okay, so now once you got that kind of all mixed together, you're gonna take your wet ingredients. It doesn't matter how you put these in, you're just gonna start to mix them together. We're gonna get our whisk at this point, not your fingers, and we can start to whisk them very softly into the flour. Don't add your water yet. You can add the eggs. Don't add your water yet because that's gonna activate the yeast and we're not quite ready for that process. So just start with the wet ingredients and slowly add them in. Perfect. Get the eggs in there. Gently mix it together.
Perfect. Here's the oil for you. Anytime you're working with flour, it's not necessarily a clean process.
No, it's definitely not. I'll tell you what, my mom always said she's never been a baker. She's always been a cook. And you can definitely tell who's a baker and who's a cook. I always struggle with this process a little bit.
All right, I'm gonna add the honey and use this spatula here to get all of it out.
Perfect. Nice. Honey is always so sticky, but I always prefer honey in challah over sugar because honey doesn't overly sweeten it. It just has like a really soft texture versus sugar. If you like sugar, go for it, but I just prefer a good honey. So once we kind of get this mixed in, you can kind of tell it's a little globby, but I just want to kind of generally get it mixed together. And then once we have that, we can start adding our water. You're going to do this very slowly and begin to whisk harder as your water is added.
You ready?
Yes.
Perfect. So the important thing to know about this water is that yeast works best when it's at about 115 degrees Fahrenheit. So if it's too cold, it's not going to activate that yeast, but if it's too warm, it'll actually kill it. So we want to make sure that it's kind of right in that good 115 area. Need some more?
Oh, definitely.
So you add it slowly, just like Shayna said, because you don't want it to end up too moist.
I always remember watching Fiddler on the Roof, and they have that like Shabbat scene where everybody's getting ready for Shabbat. and there's like the women and they're cooking and they're making challah bread. And I swear, those women's forearms have to be so strong. Like, there's something about baking. It's like, I need to go to the gym more just to bake at home. And then you can always switch to your hands to mix together as well, depending on how your dough is working. I'm gonna switch to my hands just for a little bit, and then bring my whisk maybe back in towards the end. I'm actually gonna maybe hand this to you, and maybe you can get a little bit of the dough off for me.
Got it.
But I'm just gonna kind of take it and make sure I get the rest of it all mixed together. So if your dough is still a little bit too sticky, as you can see mine is, we're gonna add a little bit more flour in to kind of just balance that out. And then you just kind of keep kneading it in.
The key here is not to add too much at a time, because then you'll go the opposite direction. Your dough will be too dry, and then you'll have to add water, and it's just kind of a never-ending cycle. So little bits at a time, and kind of check it as you go.
Yeah, now we're at the point where I can get it out of the bowl. We're just gonna remove the bowl. I'm gonna hold it. And then Alexia, would you add some flour to the surface? This is an important part because you don't want your dough to stick to the surface.
Kind of spread it around.
That's perfect, look at that.
Okay.
And then we can kind of put it down here. Once I get it off of my fingers, I'm gonna give Alexia half. We'll see who can knead it faster.
I think I'm gonna win since you've been kneading for like 10 minutes now.
I don't know. My muscles are now activated.
It could go one of two ways. We shall see.
It's like Mario Kart, but Shabbat edition. So one really cool aspect about challah that I really like, not everybody does this, but for those who do 2 challah loaves on Shabbat, and they, this kind of symbolizes the double blessing that the Israelites get in the desert with the manna, right?
Yep. God always provided on Friday. He would give them a double portion. So some people make 2 separate loaves of challah symbolizing that. So God provides for us so that we can rest on Shabbat and truly delight in Him and not worry about where our provision is going to come from.
Yep. So I just think that's so beautiful. So what some people will do is they'll do a little prayer while they're mixing their dough, and just like pray that the Lord does financial provision as well as just spiritual provision in their lives, because He is a good God and He does provide for us in so many ways, and oftentimes more than we often expect. So they do that prayer while they're kneading their dough, which I think is just so gorgeous.
I agree.
Like, really allows you to engage more.
You're getting there.
With getting prepared for the Shabbat and the time that we come to meet with the Lord. I'm almost there.
So close.
It's no longer sticking quite to my hands. So just keep kneading for a couple minutes, and once we're ready, perfect. So the kneading probably should have taken you between 5 and 10 minutes, just depending on how you knead it. So we'll just combine ours together. I'll mix it together. And once we get it all combined, you're gonna tell that it's ready, because it kind of has this like ready to go, roll into a ball, like form. Like I can hold it and it's pretty stable. So we're going to take another bowl and get it ready to put the dough into. Life hack, if you don't have like a really good brush to kind of get the olive oil spread around your bowl, you can either take a food prep glove or a Ziploc bag and use that to really evenly coat it without getting that into the dough that you already have on your hands, or just making sure that it just really nicely coats the bowl. So I'll usually just pour a little bit into my hand and then begin to coat.
Perfect. All right. So this is really good, because what we don't want to happen is when the dough is rising, we don't want it to stick to the bowl. We don't want to lose any of that goodness. So we go ahead and coat it with the oil so it doesn't stick. just like Shayna's doing.
Perfect.
All right. Now I'm gonna go ahead and put this in here. Do you wanna pat it down for me?
Yes.
Perfect. So she's gonna go ahead and kind of just make it nice and even in the bowl. And then we're gonna let it rise for about 1 to 2 hours. We want it to double in size thereabouts, 1.5 to 2 times its normal size. What we're gonna go ahead and do is put some saran wrap on the top, cover it, let it double in size over 1 to 2 hours, and then we will be ready to braid. All right, now that your dough has risen for about 1 to 2 hours, we are going to go ahead and braid this bad boy.
Perfect. So what you're gonna need is your dough that's risen for about 1.5 hours to 2 hours, a little bit of flour and a little bit of water, and a knife to cut the dough with, as well as your cooking pan. So if you get all of those things out, we'll get started. We're gonna start by taking the dough out of your rising bowl.
Do you want to flour the surface?
Oh yes, actually. You're going to start with flouring your surface, and then taking the dough out of your bowl, and you'll put it right into the middle of your floured surface.
Definitely be generous with that flour. We do not want things sticking. Like it has to our bowl.
And there's gonna be a lot of air in your dough, so you're just gonna wanna take it and kind of get that dough out by kneading it a little bit. Not too much, but you just wanna make sure that that air is out for when we get to the braiding portion. So after we've done nice little kneading, perfect, you're gonna kind of get it into a rectangle formation so that you can cut it into 3 portions. So I'm just gonna kind of like roll that out a little bit.
Beautiful.
Perfect.
We ready?
Yes.
All
Let's
right.
cut that into 3 portions.
Making them even is always tricky.
That's okay. The nice thing with cooking dough, it doesn't have to be perfectly even. Perfect. So we'll have little balls just like this. And once all 3 of your strands are cut, you can begin to roll them into the strands. These strands need to be about 20 inches long, and you want them to be very symmetrical in size. They should be the same thickness throughout. Do the best you can to do that, because it'll keep the challah from looking funky when you cook it, and also from cooking at different temperatures or at different ways. Like one part might be like super brown and the other part might be really doughy if it's a little funky in sizes.
Uneven bread is never the best.
Exactly. So as you're doing this, one thing I do is I kind of just like squish and pull a little bit, squish and pull. You don't want to do this too much where it's like ripping the dough, but it just allows it to kind of stretch out a little bit while you do it, because you just want to kind of get it as long as possible. And the other thing is you can also do this with more strands. So some people will do this with like 6 strands, or some people will do it with 4 strands. So it just depends on what you're doing, but we're just gonna do a 3-strand braid for today, the most basic of them all.
We don't like to get too complicated over here.
Not too complicated, that's right. Sometimes simplicity is the best thing that you can do. Okay, so once you have your 3 strands laid out, they're kind of all the same size, you can take a little bit of water on your fingers, and you're just gonna bring those edges together. And you can use the water to help them stick together. You don't want to do too much water though, because then it'll get like super doughy again, but just enough where you can kind of squish it together and get rid of those lines.
Mm-hmm. It won't separate while you're baking, and that would be really unfortunate, so we like to use the water so it doesn't do that.
Correct. So once you've got your edges down, you can begin braiding. For this braid, we're gonna do strands over versus under. So if you have 3 strands, you're gonna take your strand on the right and go underneath the middle. And now that's gonna be the middle strand. And then you're gonna take your left strand and come underneath that new middle strand, and then it will become the middle. You're gonna start again. Take the right strand, come underneath the middle strand. Take the left strand, come underneath the middle strand, and you're gonna just keep doing that. Right, under, right, under, left, under. And you don't wanna do it too tight either, because if you're pulling on it, then what's gonna happen is your top end is gonna be really thick, and then your bottom end is gonna be really thin because you've started to pull as you go. So just kind of let the dough be loose. Don't feel like it needs to be too tight. And then when you get to the end, you're gonna do the same thing that you did at the top. You're gonna take your water and kind of squish the end together. And you can see what Alexia's doing here. She's kind of pulling at it. She wants to kind of make sure that it feels like it can breathe, like it's not squished together. And the other thing that you can do is what she's just starting to do, is you can kind of squish it back together like this, so that it stays nice and thick and doesn't feel like it's spread out.
We don't want any holes in the middle between the braids. That would end up being kind of weird. It wouldn't cook evenly, so we definitely want to make sure it's nice and compact, and we're gonna let it rise again too, so that will kind of eliminate that problem of letting it expand and getting some holes in between.
100%. So the next thing you're gonna do is you're gonna grab either your brush for your oil, your food glove, which we'll be using, or your Ziploc bag. And then you're gonna get your oil out, and you're gonna oil your pan and make sure it's nice and evenly oiled so that we can stick the challah bread on it.
Thank you,
So
thank you.
A little bit in her hand.
Ooh.
Let me know if you need a little bit more than that.
To be honest, I think I might.
Oh. Doesn't hurt to add a little bit more oil. Perfect.
Thank you.
So what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your challah bread and you're gonna put it onto the pan, and that's what it's gonna rise on for the next 30 minutes to an hour, depending on what you have time for. So you can stick it in the sun. You're gonna stick saran wrap over the top to let it rise, and then we're gonna bake it. Oh, I almost forgot. The egg mix.
That's important. That's definitely important. It makes sure that your outside gets a nice golden brown feel to it without being burnt. So that egg mix is great. So what you'll do is you'll take an egg, and we just use an egg yolk, correct?
Just an egg yolk.
Perfect. So when you crack that egg yolk, you can kind of separate the whites from the yolk, and then just take the yolk, beat it up, and then you'll have this like kind of thick egg mixture. You can take like a kind of like a turkey baster, and you can use that to brush it on, or just a fork, or your hands if you're like us.
You can get your food glove back out.
Yeah. And then you can put the egg wash over the top after it's risen and right before you put it in the oven.
Yep, that's perfect. So when you go to put it in the oven in the next 30 minutes to an hour, what you're gonna do is you're gonna stick it on 350, and when you stick it in, you're gonna wanna stick this on another pan. So it's gonna be 2 pans thick. That's gonna keep the bottom of the challah from burning. And then also something to watch out for is that if the challah starts to get really brown early on in the cooking process, like you're 10-15 minutes in and it's starting to get that golden brown color already, you can take aluminum foil and put it over the top of it to keep the top from getting too crunchy and the inside staying doughy, so it'll cook better. So just make sure you watch it as it goes through the process, and then you're gonna cook it till the dough in the inside is fully cooked and the top of it has a nice golden brown color.
Perfect. We'll see you with the final product. Alrighty, folks, we have our finished challah loaf here. It took about 30 minutes, and we didn't even have to put aluminum foil on it, which is pretty impressive. It just became perfectly golden brown, just the way it is.
Yeah, so you can see that it has this like beautiful glaze to it that comes from the egg yolk, and then the braid is still there, but it kind of gets filled in a little bit with that beautiful egg glaze. So I can't wait to try this.
I'm super excited. You ready?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Wow, look at the inside.
It looks so good.
It just has that beautiful like bounce to it. Can you see that?
It's good stuff.
Oh, it smells good too.
Exactly. Want to try it?
Call it cheers.
That's a thing, right? That's good. Well, we hope you enjoyed this recipe as much as we did. We had such a great time making it and baking it and just presenting it to you today. So we hope you enjoyed it as much as we did.
Yep. If in case you need this, you can scroll down below in the description and you can find the ingredients that we use, the measurements, as well as just a really basic description on how to do this recipe in your homes.
We hope you have a restful Shabbat.
Shabbat Shalom.